Nobody tells you about the silence. Not the good kind of silence. Not the kind that comes after a long day when the house is finally quiet and you can hear yourself think. The other kind. The kind that fills a room the moment your family figures out what you've become. The kind that settles into holiday dinners and Sunday phone calls and birthday texts that used to say happy birthday and now say happy birthday. Also, I've been meaning to ask you something. Nobody prepares you for that silence. Nobody puts it in the financial independence books. Nobody mentions it in the YouTube videos about index funds and passive income and the road to your first million. They talk about the number. They never talk about what the number does to the people who love you. You grew up in a house where money was the thing nobody talked about directly but everyone felt constantly. It was in the way your mother's voice changed when a bill arrived. In the way your father worked doubles on weekends without being asked because asking would mean admitting the math didn't work. In the way certain conversations just didn't happen at your kitchen table. Not because your family wasn't smart or loving or capable. Because the system they were inside of didn't leave room for those conversations. You watched all of it. You absorbed it. And somewhere along the way, without telling anyone, you decided you were going to learn how money actually worked. Not the version your family knew, not survival math. The other version. The one where money grows while you sleep. The one where assets do the working and you do the living. The one that nobody in your neighborhood was teaching because nobody in your neighborhood had been taught. It took years. It took sacrifices that looked like nothing from the outside because you kept them quiet. It took Friday nights you didn't go out, purchases you didn't make, vacations you deferred, and one very long decade of doing the invisible thing consistently while the world kept rewarding the visible ones. And then one morning, on an ordinary Tuesday, you opened an account on your phone and the number on the screen crossed a threshold your family has never stood on the other side of. $1 million. You sat with it for a while. You didn't call anyone. You made coffee. You went about your day. Because you had learned by then that the milestones that actually matter tend to arrive quietly, without fanfare, into an ordinary morning that has no idea what just happened. But here's what you didn't know yet. You didn't know that the number wasn't just a number. You didn't know that it was also a mirror. And that everyone in your life was about to see themselves in it differently. The first shift is so subtle you almost miss it. It starts with your cousin Marcus. You've known Marcus your whole life. You played basketball in the same driveway for 15 years. He was at your grandmother's funeral. He is the kind of person who called just to call, no agenda, no ask, just a voice on the other end of the phone that felt like home. The calls don't stop, but they change temperature. It starts small. He mentions he's been having a rough few months at work. You listen. You ask questions. The conversation feels normal. Then near the end, almost as an afterthought, he mentions a situation with his car. The transmission. The repair estimate. You do the math in your head automatically, the way you always do now, and you know the number he's circling without him saying it directly. You say you're sorry to hear that and tell him you hope it works out. He says yeah and the call ends a little shorter than usual. 3 days later he texts. Just checking in. You respond. The conversation is warm but careful, the way conversations get when something unspoken is living inside them. You know what the unspoken thing is. He knows you know. Neither of you says it. That's the first shift. The moment someone who loves you starts relating to what you might give them instead of who you actually are. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in like a weather change. You feel it before you can name it. Your aunt finds out next. You're not sure exactly how because you didn't tell anyone directly. But money has a way of making itself known even when you're careful. Maybe it was the way you didn't flinch when someone mentioned a price. Maybe it was the vacation you took. Maybe it was just the specific quality of calm you carry now that reads differently to the people who watched you struggle. She calls on a Saturday morning and the conversation is warm and lovely and then, right before she hangs up, she says she's been meaning to ask if you know anything about helping her refinance her house. She says her son mentioned you might know about that kind of thing. You say you can look into it. She says wonderful and the call ends. You put the phone down and sit for a moment. Because what just happened wasn't a question about refinancing. It was a reclassification. You are no longer her niece or nephew who made good. You are now a resource. A node in a network of need that you didn't know you had joined until you were already inside it. You love your aunt. That's what makes it complicated. If you didn't love her, it would be easy. You'd draw a line and move on. But you do love her, and the love makes the reclassification hurt in a way that has no clean name. The family gathering that year is Thanksgiving. Same house. Same table. Same slightly uneven floor that everyone has been meaning to fix for 11 years. Your grandmother makes the same food she has made every Thanksgiving since before you were born, and the smell of it does something to you the moment you walk in the door, pulls you back to a version of yourself that predates everything you've built. You sit down. The meal is good. The conversation is easy for the first part. And then, almost on schedule, it turns. Your uncle makes a joke about rich people. Everyone laughs. You laugh too, one beat late, because you needed that beat to decide which version of yourself is sitting in this chair. Then your brother brings up a business idea he's been working on. He's been talking about this idea for 2 years. You've heard versions of it before. This version has more detail, more confidence, and a specific number attached to it. A number he needs to get it off the ground. He doesn't ask you directly. He presents the idea to the table. But the presentation is angled toward you in a way that everyone at the table can feel, even if nobody says so. You ask him questions. Good questions. The kind that probe the assumptions underneath the idea rather than the surface of it. He answers some of them. Some of them he doesn't have answers to yet. You tell him you think it's interesting and that you'd love to talk more when he's fleshed it out a little further. Something shifts in his face. Just slightly. Just for a moment. And then it smooths over and the conversation moves on and nobody acknowledges what just happened. But something happened. You both know it. The dynamic between you and your brother, the one that was built over 30 years of shared bedrooms and inside jokes and covering for each other in ways your parents never knew about, has just added a new layer. A layer that neither of you asked for and both of you now have to carry. Money doesn't break family relationships. That's not the truth of it. The truth is more complicated and harder to say out loud. Money reveals the relationships. It shows you which ones were built on solid ground and which ones have been held together by the shared experience of having nothing. When the nothing goes away, some of those structures shift. Not collapse. Shift. And the shifting is its own kind of grief because you didn't lose anyone. You just lost the version of things that existed before the number changed. Your mother is the hardest one to talk about. She worked 30 years at a job that paid her just enough to keep working it. She raised you without ever once making you feel poor, which was its own kind of genius, its own kind of invisible labor. She knew how to stretch things. She knew how to make Tuesday feel like something. She is one of the most resourceful people you have ever known and the system she lived inside never once recognized that. She knows about the money now. You didn't hide it from her the way you hid it from everyone else. She's your mother. She knew before you told her, the way mothers sometimes know things before they're told. She doesn't ask you for anything. That's the thing about your mother. She never asks for anything directly. What she does instead is mention things. Mention that the water heater has been making a sound. Mention that the car needs tires. Mention that the property taxes went up again this year. She mentions these things the way she always has, as facts, as weather reports, not as requests. But now the mentions land differently. Now they land with the specific weight of things you could fix completely and immediately and without feeling it. And the question of whether to fix them, how to fix them, whether fixing them changes something between you that you don't want changed, that question doesn't have an easy answer. You pay for things quietly when you can. The water heater gets replaced and you handle it as a bill rather than a gift because you know your mother well enough to know that a gift would embarrass her in a way that a bill wouldn't. The tires get sorted. You don't make a production of any of it. You just make things not be problems anymore, quietly, from the side, the way she always handled things when you were growing up and she didn't want you to see her worried. She calls you on a Wednesday night a few months later, just to talk. No mentions. No weather reports. Just her voice and yours and a conversation about nothing in particular that goes on for an hour. When it ends she says I'm proud of you. Just that. Simple. You sit with your phone after she hangs up and you feel something that took a long time to arrive. Not the pride of the number. Something older and quieter than that. The specific satisfaction of having changed something real for someone who spent decades changing things for you without asking for recognition. That's when you start to understand what the money was always for. Not for the freedom, though the freedom is real. Not for the security, though the security matters. For the ability to make things not be problems. Quietly, from the side. Without production. Without the other person having to ask. Your father calls 6 weeks later. He never calls first. That's just who he is, a man who shows love through presence and action and the very occasional text that says thinking of you and means everything. The fact that he's calling first means something and you know it before you pick up. He tells you he's thinking about retiring. He's 64 years old. He has been working since he was 16 and he is tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep can reach. The pension is okay but not enough. He does the math out loud to you on the phone the way he never would have done with anyone else. He's short by about $800 a month to retire comfortably. You listen to the whole thing. You let him finish. And then you tell him you'll handle the $800. He goes quiet for a moment. Then he says you don't have to do that. You say you know. Another pause. He says okay. That's the whole conversation. 4 sentences. But underneath those 4 sentences is 30 years of watching him leave before sunrise and come home after dark and never once say this is hard. And what you said with those 4 sentences was I saw it. All of it. And now it's over. He retires 4 months later. You get a photo in a text on his first Monday morning not at work. He's sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, the sun coming in at an angle. He's not doing anything. He's just sitting. He looks like a man who has finally been allowed to stop. You look at that photo for a long time. Here is what nobody tells you about becoming the first millionaire in your family. It is not mostly about money. It is mostly about identity, about the gap that opens between who you were and who you are and the specific loneliness of standing in that gap while the people you love most are still standing on the other side of it. You will carry 2 versions of yourself for a long time. The one who grew up in the house with the tight months and the unspoken math and the Maxwell House coffee tin above the refrigerator. And the one who built a different life on the other side of all of that. And both of them are real and both of them are you, and some days the distance between them feels like a chasm and other days it feels like a bridge. The cousin who calls differently now, you don't lose him. You just learn to love him in a new way, a way that includes knowing what he needs and sometimes giving it and sometimes not and always doing it from a place of clarity rather than guilt. The brother with the business idea, you go back to him 3 months later. You spend a Saturday going through his numbers the way you once wished someone had done with you. You don't write a check. You ask questions until the idea is better. He launches 6 months later with a small business loan and his own savings and something he built with his own hands. He calls you the day he opens. He's crying a little. He says he couldn't have done it without you. You didn't write the check. You gave him something harder to give and harder to receive. You gave him the belief that the thing was possible and the knowledge to make it real. The table is still slightly uneven. The floor still needs fixing. Your grandmother still makes the same food and the smell of it still does the same thing to you when you walk in the door. But something is different now. Not in the room. In you. You know what the money is for. You know what it isn't for. You know the difference between helping someone and doing the work for them. You know that the first million is just a number until you decide what it means. And you know that the most important thing you ever built wasn't in an account. It was at a kitchen table, on a Saturday morning, with someone you loved, going through numbers they didn't understand yet, showing them a door they didn't know was there. That's the inheritance. Not the money, the knowing.